This anime begins by showing a past scene of Kirito with his close friends, Yu-Gi-Oh and Alice, in a virtual world called Underworld. Everyone in the Underworld has their own sacred duty, where Yu-Gi-Oh is tasked with cutting down a giant tree called Giga's Seger or the Demon Tree, while Alice has a sacred duty to learn healing techniques in that world. Meanwhile, Kirito, who still didn't have a sacred duty, spent most of his time helping Yu-Gi-Oh to cut down the demon tree that never fell, even though Yu-Gi-Oh's family had cut down the tree for hundreds of years. Every day, Alice would approach Yu-Gi-Oh and Kirito to give them some food for their lunch. In the virtual world, when summer has arrived, food has a much faster expiry date than food in the real world. Therefore, after the food has been prepared or cooked, they must finish the food immediately before the taste of the food changes. But on that day, Kirito wanted to find a way so he could slowly enjoy Alice's food without rushing to finish it. He had the idea of wrapping the food in a block of ice because food kept at a low temperature usually had a longer life. Unfortunately, in the Ruled village they lived in then, there was still no one selling ice blocks or producing ice, so they had to look behind the ice elsewhere. Kirito then remembered the legend of a male hero named Berkuli, who had managed to find a secret cave in the mountains located on the border. In the secret cave, Berkuli met a giant dragon, treasure, legendary swords, and chunks of ice hanging from the cave roof. Kirito intends to go to the location of the secret cave to find ice cubes in that place. However, Yu-Gi-Oh then recalled that according to the manual of the Underworld Index, everyone was forbidden from going to the border area. At the same time, the secret cave was probably located in the border area, so they couldn't possibly be allowed into that place. But Alice, who had learned more things from Index's manual, said they could come to the area as long as they didn't cross the boundary line. Index's manual is a book that contains a set of absolute rules that everyone in the Underworld must obey. The next day, Kirito and the others agreed to go to the hidden cave to get some ice cubes from the cave wall. After gathering a few chunks of ice, they immediately rushed back to Ruled village before it got dark. But on their way home, they suddenly forgot their exit route and got lost in a passage that led them to the border area. In the border area, or the Dark Territory area, the three saw Dark Territory knights fighting against knights from other kingdoms. When the Dark Territory's knight was defeated and fell to the ground, Alice felt sorry for him and intended to help the knight. But as soon as her hand crossed the borderline, an NPC avatar appeared and immediately warned her that she had violated the rules of the index book. After that, Alice and the others returned to their village after finding the right route. A few days after she was reported by the NPCs, the Knights of Integrity came to her house to arrest her and take her to the cathedral church to be executed. Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh couldn't do much to save Alice because they weren't strong enough to put up a fight against the Integrity Knight soldiers. In addition, Yu-Gi-Oh's left eye suddenly gave a red warning sign that prevented him from saving her. Not long after Alice left the village, Kirito suddenly woke up and logged out of the virtual world of the Underworld. He was surprised by the tears that flowed from his eyes because he did not have any memories of the Underworld. That day, Kirito and Asuna met with other friends at a cafe to discuss the BOB tournament in the GGO game which will be held in a few days. On that occasion, he told about a technology company called Rath, where he worked part-time. The Rath company developed a technology called Soul Translator that can be used to dive in or log into a virtual world called Underworld. The time that passes in the Underworld tends to be faster than in the real world, where 1 minute in the real world is equivalent to 1 day in the Underworld. Besides that, any user or human who dives into the Underworld will not have any memories of the human world as if they were reborn with new memories. The same thing will happen when a user or human logs out of the Underworld virtual world. They won't have any memory of what happened in that world. This is because all memories belonging to the user or human will be transferred to a memory box called the Light Cube. The entire series of STL and Underworld development projects is known as the Alicization Project. That night when Kirito drove Asuna home, Kirito was suddenly attacked by an unknown man named Johnny Black, who turned out to be the third death gun that had ever terrorized players in the GGO game. Johnny attacked Kirito in the same way he used to kill the top players in the GGO game by injecting toxic chemicals. Even though Kirito had fought back using an umbrella he was carrying, Johnny had already stabbed the poisonous needle into his chest. As a result, Kirito started having a heart attack and convulsions before he finally fell unconscious. Asuna, who was worried about his condition, immediately contacted the hospital so that he could be treated immediately before it was too late. When Asuna and Kirito's family arrived at the hospital, they received information from the doctor treating Kirito that his condition was currently very critical. Even the doctor predicted that his chances of survival were slim, and they had to prepare for the worst. The doctor advised his family to transfer him to a bigger hospital with more complete medical equipment. During that confusion, Kirito's family received an offer of help from his co-worker named Kikuoka. He said he knew of a place that could increase his chances of survival and help him recover more effectively. It turned out that the place Kikuoka was referring to as Kirito's recovery place was the Rath Company Research and Development Headquarters located at the port. The Rath Company does have many sophisticated tools and machines that can support his life and help his healing process, so it is not surprising that Kikuoka chose to bring him to that place. After Asuna learned about Kirito's true location from Yui, she became worried. She intended to catch up with him as soon as possible because she was afraid the Rath Company would conduct a dangerous experiment on Kirito. To gain access to the Rath Company headquarters, Yui asks Asuna to ask a research woman named Rinko Kojiro for help. After traveling by helicopter, Asuna and Rinko arrived at the Rath Company headquarters. When she first came to the place, Asuna immediately scolded Kikuoka for lying to her and Kirito's family by saying that he would take him to another hospital. But after hearing Kikuoka's explanation about the Soul Translator technology that can keep Kirito's consciousness and save him, Asuna began to feel calmer. Kikuoka then explained that the Rath Company is currently developing AI technology based on the human mind and spirit. So far, the Rath Company has succeeded in copying human souls and minds into a Fluctlight program, and all the Fluctlight data will be stored safely in a memory called the Light Cube. Currently, all the inhabitants of the Underworld virtual world are not only inhabited by ordinary NPCs but also virtual human clones derived from Fluctlight data. But even though most of the Underworld's inhabitants had the consciousness and feelings of a real human, they still couldn't break or cross the boundaries set by the Index's book system. Therefore, during the recovery period, Kirito will be sent or dived into the Underworld to test whether he can influence the Underworld residents to violate the Index. If he influenced the population to violate the Index book, the Underworld project would be perfect and considered a success. This is because the offenses committed by the Underworld natives prove that they did not behave like mere system NPCs but also possessed consciousness like real humans. That means that when Kirito logged in a while ago, he almost completed the mission after influencing Alice to commit an offense by crossing the borderline. But the mission was still considered a failure because Alice had to be captured and executed by the Integrity Knight in the Central Church. Currently, Kirito is again diving into the Underworld using the Soul Translator machine to complete the mission. When he entered the Underworld, he felt strange because he could still remember all the memories in the real world. Whereas usually, when someone dives into the virtual world of the Underworld, they don't have any memories of the real world. Kirito tried to go around and see the surroundings to confirm that it was a virtual world. When he accidentally ran into Yu-Gi-Oh, they didn't seem to recognize each other, as if the memories of their previous friendship had been erased. But after he asked many questions about Yu-Gi-Oh's identity, he immediately realized that Yu-Gi-Oh was neither a player nor an NPC but a Fluctlight or an artificial human. He thought Kirito was a lost wanderer, so he offered to help take Kirito to a church in his village. As a thank you, Kirito tried to help Yu-Gi-Oh cut down the demon tree that had stood for hundreds of years. While carrying out their duties, Yu-Gi-Oh shared that there was once a kind girl who used to deliver lunch to him, but now that girl had been taken away to the capital because she had violated the book of the Underworld Index. After hearing that, Kirito intends to go to the capital to find a girl and find a way to get out of that world. But to do that, he needed Yu-Gi-Oh's help, so he had to help Yu-Gi-Oh cut down the demon tree first. Kirito also asked if there was another weapon that was better than the axe they were currently using. Yu-Gi-Oh then dragged the blue rose sword inherited from his family and handed it over to Kirito. Unfortunately, because the level of the sword was slightly higher than theirs, they still had a hard time lifting and wielding the sword. In the afternoon, when Kirito came to the church to rest, he met a little girl named Selka, who turned out to be Alice's sister. He told Selka about what had happened to Alice based on the story he had heard from Yu-Gi-Oh earlier. In the middle of the night, when Kirito was asleep, Selka suddenly woke up and intended to go to the border area to be able to violate the Index book like her older sister did. She hoped that in that way, she would also be caught by the Knights of Integrity and brought to the Central Church so that she could meet Alice. However, things didn't go according to Selka's original plan because a group of goblins suddenly appeared and took her hostage. Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh, knowing that she had gone to the border, immediately rushed to catch up and save her. Upon learning that a group of goblins had captured her, Yu-Gi-Oh and Kirito tried to defeat them using the swords they found in the cave. During that battle, Yu-Gi-Oh suffered a severe wound after one of the goblins stabbed a sword into his body. Kirito, who saw his condition, became very angry and immediately attacked the goblin leader with great barbarity. As a result, the entire army of goblins became frightened and immediately fled from that place. After that, Kirito freed Selka and asked her to heal Yu-Gi-Oh with her healing skills. Seeing Yu-Gi-Oh in critical condition, she advised Kirito to transfer some of their health or life to Yu-Gi-Oh. Fortunately, it saved him from death, and they could return to their village safely. A few days later, they resumed their respective sacred tasks of cutting down trees and learning sacred healing techniques. After Kirito checked his own database, he found that his level had changed to higher than before, so he was sure he could lift the blue rose sword and use it to cut down the demon tree. Kirito tried to hurt the demon tree's trunk with the blue rose sword, and he could leave a very wide cut in one attack. The same thing happened to Yu-Gi-Oh! The strength level of the two of them increased after they managed to defeat the goblin group the other day. Yu-Gi-Oh! Asked Kirito to teach him how to use a sword properly because he wanted to become an integrity knight so he could go to the cathedral church and find Alice. After learning several sword techniques from Kirito, Yu-Gi-Oh! Finally succeeded in overthrowing the demonic tree that had not been able to cut down for years. After his sacred duty was completed, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Kirito decided to become sword knights as his next sacred duty. Before they went to the capital to learn to become a sword knight, Kirito was provided with a sword made from the trunk of the demon tree. After Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh! Arrived in the capital, they worked on a horse farm to survive while continuing to hone their swordsmanship at an academy. They are known as students who are very talented and skilled at using the sword, so they are appointed as companions of senior students who come from noble circles. Kirito's partner was a female senior student named Lina, while Yu-Gi-Oh!'s partner was a male senior student named Golgoroso. 1 year after training at the academy, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh! Had to part with Lina and Golgoroso because they had both graduated from the academy. Meanwhile, they had become one of the elite students in the academy and had their own companion students. Unfortunately, not everyone in the academy was impressed by Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh!'s achievements. 2 senior male students from the nobility named Humbert and Rayos looked envious of their achievements. They couldn't accept that ordinary people like Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh! Could be part of the elite group of students at the academy. In the end, Humbert and Rayos had the heart to hurt Tisei and Roni in front of Yu-Gi-Oh! To provoke his wrath. Seeing what Humbert was doing, Yu-Gi-Oh! Became furious and intended to kill him. But if Yu-Gi-Oh! Did that, the server automatically detected his violation, and his eyes would turn red. Yu-Gi-Oh!, who had lost his temper, immediately hurt Rayos' hand for daring to do something bad to Tisei and Roni. Humbert, who couldn't accept his treatment, intended to use the special right that the nobility had, which was to execute people who had transgressed. When Humbert was about to swing his sword to kill Yu-Gi-Oh!, Kirito immediately cut off his hands first. Unlike Yu-Gi-Oh!, Kirito's eyes will not turn red and explode because he is not a native of the virtual world, so he is not bound by the existing rules or systems. After successfully killing Rayos and injuring Humbert, Kirito immediately helps Yu-Gi-Oh! To save Tisei and Roni. Even though one of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s eyes had been damaged due to Index's transgression, an academy dorm keeper would be kind enough to help him heal his eye. After that, the dorm keeper handed Yu-Gi-Oh! And Kirito over to one of the Integrity Knights for trial in the cathedral church. But apparently, the Integrity Knight who picked them up was Alice, their childhood friend. Surprisingly, she didn't recognize Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh!, as if all of Alice's memories of them had been completely erased. After Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh! Were taken to the cathedral church, they were locked up in a dungeon like any other land. While in the cell, they started to wonder if the person who picked them up earlier was Alice, and if that was true, they wanted to know why she couldn't recognize them. They decided to escape from the prison and find out the answer. Although later, they will be considered traitors and become fugitives throughout the city as a consequence of their actions. After Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh! Managed to sneak out of the dungeon, they rushed towards the cathedral's church tower in search of Alice's whereabouts. But on the way, they are confronted by a male Integrity Knight named Eldery. They were forced to fight Eldery so they could infiltrate the church tower. During the battle, Yu-Gi-Oh! Suddenly remembered that he had met Eldery during the sword tournament at the academy. However, because Eldery didn't seem to recognize him, Yu-Gi-Oh! Realized that someone had manipulated his memories and the rest of the Integrity Knights. He tried to make Eldery think back about his past until a chip popped out of Eldery's head at some point. Unfortunately, just as Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh! Were about to take out the chip, another Integrity Knight attacked them with an arrow. They decided to escape from that place before another Integrity Knight appeared and caught them both. When Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh! Were hiding in a garden, they saw a secret door that had magically appeared in the center of the garden. After they entered the secret door, they moved to a large library and met a little girl named Cardinal. When Cardinal met Kirito for the first time, she knew that Kirito was not a native of the Underworld but a real human from the real world. After hearing that, he realized that she was not an NPC but a Fluctlight that had fused with the virtual world system. Afterward, Cardinal tells about the beginning of the virtual world Underworld was pioneered and developed. After the setting and inhabitants of the Underworld world were completed, 4 humans dived into the virtual world. The 4 people were the 4 Rath Company researchers who were also involved in developing the Underworld virtual world. They deliberately dive into this world to teach the Underworld natives how to survive, starting from farming, raising livestock, cutting trees, and various other jobs. But unbeknownst to the other 3 researchers, there is a researcher who is secretly teaching evil things to some Underworld residents. In addition to teaching how to survive, researchers also teach about science, family relations, and marriage systems worldwide. Sometime after the 4 players logged out, life in the virtual world of the Underworld began to develop and have an advanced civilization. One time, there was a noble couple in the underworld with a daughter named Queenella who had a sacred duty to study that world's science and healing techniques. It differs from Alice, who is still a beginner and can only treat some minor ailments. Queenella is quite a genius and can master extraordinary healing techniques. Queenella even knew a lot about the command system in the virtual world server and knew that every resident of that world could increase their level continuously. From a very young age, she secretly killed many animals in the world to increase her power level. With a very high account level, she can cure various diseases that were initially impossible to cure. After the residents learned about her healing abilities, they began to worship Queenella like a god. They even built a tower building dedicated to her so they could worship or treat her. As she grows into an adult woman, she is increasingly greedy for power and does not want anyone else to rival her power. Therefore, she created a book of index, which contained the rules not to kill other animals or humans worldwide. It was deliberately made by Queenella so that no residents of the underworld could increase their power level so that she would remain the most powerful person in the world. Several years later, as Queenella grew older, she began to look for ways to have eternal life. At that moment, she finally found a console that could be used to hack into the system and manipulate all of her account data, including her age and her strength. Since finding the console, Queenella also has a very long life and can change her appearance into a very beautiful young woman. Not only that, but she also hacks the entire system to be like a server administrator. That means she can almost control the entire system in the underworld world. But over time, Queenella's Fluctlight memory space began to decrease, so she moved some of her memory into a girl's Fluctlight. Unfortunately, the unexpected started to happen. Because the girl had some of Queenella's knowledge and power level, she finally discovered Queenella's ill will to rule the underworld. The child named Cardinal began to attack Queenella with the ability she had. However, after realizing the magnitude of her power, Cardinal decided to escape from that place and hid in the forbidden library room for many years. After telling all that, Cardinal asked Kirito to help her stop Queenella before she went any further and damaged the underworld. After hearing her explanation earlier, Kirito agreed to help her defeat Queenella. He felt that Queenella was going beyond limits by manipulating the memories of all Integrity Knights according to her own will. Kirito, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Cardinal agreed to cooperate and carry out their plan. Before Yu-Gi-Oh and Kirito left for the cathedral's church tower, Cardinal informed him that the way to restore the memory of the Integrity Knight was to take the chip in their heads and replace it with the original chip in Queenella's room. Not only that, but Cardinal provided them with 2 daggers that they could use in an emergency. Besides that, she revealed where their real swords were hidden so they could use them to defeat the tower guards. After Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh managed to infiltrate the church tower, they had to face off against the masked Integrity Knight named Dusselbert on the first floor. After defeating Dusselbert, they must fight against 2 female Integrity Knights, Linnell and Fazelle. On the next floor, Kirito has to deal with a female Integrity Knight named Finatio with a beautiful face and quite capable abilities. After successfully passing several Integrity Knights, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh must face off against their childhood best friend, Alice. However, because Yu-Gi-Oh couldn't bear to fight her, it was Kirito who was forced to fight her alone. Meanwhile, Yu-Gi-Oh would go to a higher floor and fight against a legendary Integrity Knight named Berkuli. At first, he still struggled to deal with Berkuli's overpowering attack. However, after he unleashed his ultimate attack using his blue rose sword, Yu-Gi-Oh finally defeated Berkuli by freezing everything in the room. After the battle ended, a short male clown named Chudokin appeared and immediately took Yu-Gi-Oh to where Queenella was. He intended to reset Yu-Gi-Oh's memories so he would not rebel or fight Queenella again. After Yu-Gi-Oh arrived at Queenella's room, he immediately took his dagger to kill her, who was sleeping. However, just before the knife hit her body, she suddenly woke up and immediately tempted him to perform a synthesis ritual so that he could become the strongest Integrity Knight. At first, Yu-Gi-Oh refused the offer, but after Queenella promised to give him a romantic gift, he began to be tempted and accepted the offer. After the synthesis ritual was completed and his memory reset, he finally turned into one of the Integrity Knights or Queenella's minions. On the other hand, Kirito and Alice were still fighting so fiercely that they both fell from the top of the tower. Fortunately, they survived after they stuck their swords between the tower walls. He then offered to help her so she wouldn't fall from the tower. Alice, who had no other choice, decided to accept Kirito's help and make peace for the time being. When it was dark, they rested on a foundation on the edge of the tower wall. On that occasion, Kirito tried to make Alice reminisce about her past so that she realized that her memory was being manipulated by Queenella. Fortunately, his efforts to resuscitate Alice succeeded, and she slowly began to side with him. Kirito and Alice rushed into the church tower building to catch up with Yu-Gi-Oh and defeat Queenella. But when they were about to infiltrate Queenella's room, they were intercepted by Yu-Gi-Oh, who had turned into a Knight of Integrity and sided with her. Kirito has no choice but to fight against his best friend to defeat Queenella and save Underworld from her greed. The duel between Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh was fierce because his strength was far superior to Kirito's. Just as he was getting cornered, Kirito tried to wake him from Quinella's influence by calling out his name repeatedly. However, since the attempt was unsuccessful, Kirito shouted Alice's name, unexpectedly making Yu-Gi-Oh pause and smile faintly. Without saying anything, he partially froze Kirito and Alice's bodies using the blue rose sword before finally going to Quinella's room. When Yu-Gi-Oh arrived at Quinella's room, she purposely removed the chip from his head to check if it was still working. However, when the chip was released, he was immediately released from her influence and recalled his mission to defeat her. Without warning, Yu-Gi-Oh instantly drew his sword towards Quinella's body. Unfortunately, his attack didn't impact her because she couldn't be hurt by ordinary metal weapons. Not long after, Kirito and Alice, freed from Yu-Gi-Oh's ice, came to Quinella's room to help him. Before that, he didn't really freeze Kirito or Alice because he never intended to harm them. He only wanted to hold them off for a while to fight Quinella alone to atone for his guilt for being tempted by her seduction. Apparently, Yu-Gi-Oh woke up before his chip was released by Quinella because he had previously remembered Alice, his childhood friend. After all, Kirito and Alice would not let Yu-Gi-Oh fight Quinella alone. What's more, Quinella is also helped by Chudolkin, a clown man who can transform into a giant fire puppet. Fortunately, they defeated Chudolkin with their powerful attacks simultaneously on him. But even though Chudolkin has lost, Quinella still has a secret weapon in the form of a sword robot with tremendous combat power. With much greater power, the sword robot could easily take down Kirito, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Alice. In that moment of crisis, Kirito remembered the dagger that Cardinal had previously given him to use in an emergency. Shortly after Kirito plunged the sword into the floor, a portal suddenly appeared, and Cardinal immediately assisted them with her healing powers. After that, she helped Yu-Gi-Oh transform into a giant sword weapon to defeat Quinella's robotic sword. After exerting all of her remaining strength and performing a few brief rituals, Cardinal was finally able to turn Yu-Gi-Oh into a giant sword weapon. In the form of a giant sword, Yu-Gi-Oh immediately fought fiercely against the giant sword robot and finally managed to defeat the giant sword robot. After that, he was determined to attack Quinella in the form of the giant sword so that he could cut off one of her arms. When he saw Yu-Gi-Oh's body that was nearly torn apart, Kirito was devastated and began to lose his will to continue the mission. Quinella tried to take advantage of the opportunity to hurt his body, but Alice successfully thwarted the action and protected him with her body. Fortunately, Kirito protected Alice before Quinella's sword hit her body because he didn't want her to be hurt like Asuna had protected him some time ago. Alice's bold action awakened Kirito from his daydream and recalled his determination to defeat Quinella. The epic battle between Kirito and Quinella began, where in this battle, he used all his strength to defeat her. After a very long battle, he was finally able to stab her heart and left her badly injured. In Quinella's dying condition, Chudolkin's fire soul suddenly possessed her, causing them both to die in a very powerful explosion. After defeating Quinella, Kirito immediately rushed to Yu-Gi-Oh and tried to heal the wounds on Yu-Gi-Oh's body with his remaining strength. Unfortunately, all of Kirito's efforts ended in vain as Yu-Gi-Oh's injuries were too severe and he couldn't hold on any longer. After Yu-Gi-Oh left for good, Kirito tried to ask the Rath Company staff for help in the real world using Quinella's console. To be able to contact them, Kirito must balance the time ratio in the virtual underworld to the time in the real world so that he can communicate in real time. Unfortunately, when Kirito managed to contact Kikuoka, instead of getting an answer from him, he actually heard gunshots repeatedly. It turned out that when he contacted him, the Rath Company was being attacked by an unknown group of armed forces. As a result of the attack, the Rath Company suffered a short circuit severe enough to cause Kirito's Fluctlight to catch fire and make Kirito in the underworld fall unconscious. This is the end of the anime. The thing that can be learned from this anime is to never give up on all the struggles we are doing so that all of the sacrifices our friends or we make do not end in vain.